My name is Brooke Ruddled, and at 33, I spent every last dollar I had on a gas station my whole family called a grave. The day I signed the papers, my mother told me to my face I was a fool. My father just looked at the wall. My brother Wade laughed and said I was a hopeless failure. They were gone before the ink was dry. 1 week later, I stood alone in the dark behind that old convenience store, pressing my hand flat against a back wall that sounded wrong. What I found behind it didn't just change my life. It rewrote the one story my family had spent 40 years telling about itself. And the day I finally said it out loud at my father's own gala, the whole room went quiet. The Tittle company in Calico Bend has one conference room, and that morning my whole family came to fill it. My father, Garrett Ruddled, walked in like he was inspecting a job site. My mother, Lorraine, sat with her purse in her lap like she might need to leave fast. I had a cashier's check for $41,000 in front of me, every cent I'd saved in 11 years. My mother said it quiet and clear, "You're throwing your life in a ditch." My father stood by the window with his back to me. "Real Ruddledges build something," he said. "They don't go digging through other people's trash." Wade leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, grinning. "You know what you are, Brooke? A hopeless failure." I signed my name. The pen didn't shake, which surprised me more than anything they said. They filed out. 3 sets of taillights going back toward town and the life that had no room in it for me. I sat alone with a deed to a dead gas station and a bank account that now read $84.16. People in Calico Bend thought I was the Ruddledge who couldn't hold anything together. The truth was duller and worse. For 6 years, I kept the books for my father's company. Then there was a land deal in 2019, and the numbers Wade wanted me to record didn't match the numbers that actually moved. I flagged it twice in writing. He told me to leave it alone. When the county came asking questions, the paperwork had my initials on the entries and Wade's fingerprints nowhere. My father chose to believe his son. I left instead of fighting it, because fighting your own family in public felt like setting fire to your own house. I opened a one-woman bookkeeping shop on 2nd Street. For 2 years, I did honest work for honest people, and it almost held. Then my biggest client filed bankruptcy and took my margins with him. So when Dale Mercer told me about a property nobody wanted, cheap enough that a woman with $84 and a ruined name could own it free and clear, I listened. The old Howard station on Route 9, shut down since 1987. Asking price, $41,000. I pulled the title myself, called the state about the underground tanks, walked the parcel twice, paid $200 I didn't have for a structural inspection. Everything checked. I bought it because it was the only door my $84 could open, and because for once I wanted to own something that was mine before anyone could put their name on it. What I didn't check was Dale's face when I told him I was skipping the inspection contingency he'd suggested. He smiled too wide and said, "Smart girl." Then he stepped outside and made a phone call I couldn't hear. The first night I owned the place, I went out alone with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee. I walked the front room, the empty coolers, the rusted register. Behind the convenience store, there was a storage room lined with collapsed shelving and a back wall finished in cheap 80s paneling. I ran my hand along it and knocked. The front and side walls knocked back solid. The back wall sounded different, deeper. There was a cool draft coming from a seam at the floor, steady, like the building was breathing out. I told myself it was a crawl space. I went home and couldn't sleep. I drove back out the next afternoon with a crowbar. The first panel came away with a shriek of old nails, and cold air rolled out over my feet. Behind the cheap paneling was a wall of poured concrete, smooth and deliberate, and set into it a steel door. Not a closet door. A heavy riveted slab with a rotary bolt handle, the kind you'd see on an old bank vault. Sealed shut, painted over, then walled in by someone who wanted it forgotten. Someone had hidden this on purpose. Twice. I didn't pry it open that night, and I want you to know why, because it tells you everything about how this ended. I photographed the door from every angle, wrote down the date and condition, measured it. Then I went home and started reading. The Howard station wasn't built as a station. The parcel showed up in county history as a bonded warehouse put up in the early 1920s by a man named Ian Howard. Bonded meant the federal government licensed it to store goods under seal. During Prohibition, a bonded warehouse was one of the few legal places liquor could exist. The building became a gas station in 1936, and somewhere in that conversion, someone had bricked up the old bonded room and built a convenience store over the memory of it. I worked the painted bolt loose with penetrating oil and patience. When it finally turned, the door swung open 2 inches and stopped. Beyond it was the top of a stone stairway, going down into a black that smelled faintly of oak. I went down 12 steps with my flashlight in one hand and my phone recording in the other. At the bottom, the smell opened up around me. Old, sweet, charred oak, slow-rotting paper. The cellar was bigger than the storage room above it, stone walls, a vaulted brick ceiling, and wooden racks running the full length. On them, in the beam of my light, rows of dark glass. Hundreds of bottles, wrapped in straw and brittle paper, packed in crates stamped with faded ink. I lifted one carefully and turned it in the light. Hand-blown glass, heavy, sealed with wax over the cork, a label spotted but legible. A bonded whiskey, strip stamp still across the cap, a date in the corner that started with 19 and a 2. My hands were not steady anymore. I know what a single authenticated bottle of bonded pre-repeal whiskey can bring at auction. $1,000 is the low end. The famous ones bring far more. And I was standing in a stone room with rack after rack of them, 90 years sealed, wax intact. I didn't call anyone. I sat on the bottom step in the dark and breathed until the number my brain kept producing felt real enough to hold. Then I got up and started counting crates. The bottles weren't the win. Provenance was. So instead of telling a soul, I photographed every crate, every stamp, every label, logged them in a spreadsheet like inventory. I emailed a fine spirits auction house in Denver, plainly, as the verified legal owner of the property, asking what authentication would require. They responded within an hour. They were very interested. Then I went back down with new eyes, not looking at the bottles now but at the room itself. A bonded warehouse runs on records. If Ian Howard sealed this room, he sealed his paperwork with it. I just had to find where. I found it behind the old desk bolted to the far wall, a small iron door set into the stone at knee height. Inside was a brass-cornered strong box, green with age, heavy as a sleeping cat. Inside were Ian Howard's records, a bonded manifest from the distillery, a federal permit for the warehouse. And underneath those, folded in oilcloth, a promissory note from 1931 and a bill of sale dated March of that same year. The deed for this very parcel with Howard's signature on the seller's line. I read the buyer's name 3 times before it would hold still. Amos Ruddled, my grandfather, the man with nothing who came to Calico Bend and ended up owning half of Main Street. Stapled behind them was a county foreclosure notice from 1933, and the papers together told a story my tired eyes could read in one sitting. The note was in Amos Ruddled's own hand. He'd loaned Howard money against the warehouse in the worst year of the Depression, at terms most people today would call predatory. Full balance due in 90 days. When Howard couldn't pay, Amos took the land, the building, and everything in it for the price of the debt. Everything in it. Except Amos never found the seller because the bonded room was already sealed when he took the keys. A man in a hurry to look respectable doesn't go knocking on his own walls. I sat at the counter holding 90 years of my family's first lie. The fortune my father built his pride on. The name this whole town worshipped. It started right here, in the room my father had called other people's trash. I wanted to drive straight to his house and throw that bill of sale on his kitchen table. I sat in my car for 20 minutes wanting to. But the satisfying thing and the smart thing are almost never the same thing, and my family wins every fight that happens out loud and in the dark. So I did it by the book, scanned every page. Originals in a safe deposit box 2 towns over, no Ruddled had ever set foot in it. The Denver appraiser called the documentation extraordinary and confirmed it would authenticate the entire collection beyond dispute. I had a lawyer review my title and confirm in writing what I already knew. I owned this parcel free and clear, bought with my own money, recorded in my own name, no lien, no cosigner, no ruddled anywhere near the line. Dale came by 3 days in, unannounced, eyes going straight past me to the open paneling and the steel door. I stepped into his path with a tarp and a smile and steered him back toward the front. "Old utility room," I said. "Mold. Insurance won't cover a tour." He laughed, but his eyes stayed on that doorway the whole time. Then he sat in my gravel lot for a full minute, not driving, just talking into his phone. Dale had found the deal. Dale had worked for my father. Dale, who knew the old stories about a bonded warehouse on Route 9 and a sealed room full of something nobody had ever actually claimed. My family came next in sequence, almost comedic in how transparent it was. First, my parents, my mother carrying a casserole, my father casually suggesting the property be folded into ruddled holdings to protect me on the paperwork. His jaw worked when I declined. Then Wade, who got right to the offer and when I said no let the concern drop away like a coat he was tired of carrying. "You don't get it," he said. "That land's got family history. Granddad's history." He said it so smoothly that I knew he had no idea I was holding the foreclosure notice that proved otherwise. But the slip was made. They knew. The Rutledges had always known how the name started. Wade left telling me I had until Founders' Day to be reasonable. The appraisal came on a Tuesday. I read it 4 times standing in my kitchen. The Denver house's conservative estimate for the collection at auction was north of $1 million, with the historically significant bottles likely to draw well past that. I set the phone down carefully, sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and let myself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. Then I got up. Because a number like that doesn't make you safe. It makes you a target, and I'd seen what my family did over a strip parcel worth $40,000. I signed the auction consignment with Denver. I reached out to a developer named Sutter, my father's oldest rival, who'd been trying to get into Calico Bend for years and been blocked at every turn by ruddled land and holdings. He wanted to restore the station into something real, a roadhouse, a stop worth driving for. My father's rival standing on the parcel my father craved. There was a kind of justice in that I didn't have to manufacture. The invitation to the Founders' Day Gala came formal on heavy paper. My father wanted me on stage with the family. He was going to speak about new beginnings, about the discovery coming home to ruddled holdings with my daughter's blessing. My mother let slip that he'd already given the paper an early word. There would be a story in Sunday's edition. It was a good trap. Stand up in front of 200 people and the press and say no, or give him everything with a microphone in your face and no graceful exit. I said I'd come. My mother drove away thinking it was over. The night before the gala I didn't write a speech. My family's power was always noise. If I walked in there to outshout them I'd lose, because that was their game on their court. So I prepared one thing, a clean manila envelope. Inside it, copies of the documents that mattered. My recorded deed, the auction consignment, the lawyer's title opinion, and the 1931 bill of sale stapled to the 1933 foreclosure, Amos Ruddled's signature where everyone could see it. I checked each page the way I used to check a ledger before an audit, everything in order. I went to bed early and, to my own surprise, slept. The Founders' Day Gala filled the old Elks Hall on Main. 200 chairs, white lights, the mayor, the county commissioners, the publisher of the Calico Bend Sentinel near the front with a photographer. 3 tables back, a man in a quiet gray suit with a leather folio, and the still, watchful patience of someone there to confirm a thing rather than celebrate it. The auction house had sent a representative, as I'd asked them to in writing. My father worked the room like the king he'd always been. When they handed him the plaque, 200 people rose to their feet. I rose with them, calm as still water. He let the applause run long before he raised a hand to quiet it. He told the story of Amos arriving with nothing, of building something from dust. Then his voice warmed into the part of the speech they'd written for me. The families had a hard season, he said, but Rutledges don't quit on each other. What Brooke found out there belongs to all of us, to this town's history. Tonight, I'm proud to say the discovery is coming home to the family, with my daughter's blessing. He held out his hand toward me. Brooke, honey, come on up here and say a few words. 200 faces turned. The photographer lifted his camera. My mother beamed. Wade watched with the flat, careful eyes of a man, waiting to see his bet pay off. I walked up the 3 steps in my dark blue dress, and my father handed me the microphone with the smile of a man who has already won. I took it. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and my voice came out steady and warm, which I think unsettled him more than shouting would have. "I want to tell all of you the truth about the old station. Because it's a better story than the one you've heard." I opened the envelope. I bought the Howard property myself with my own savings, free and clear, recorded at the county under my name only. Here's the deed. I set the stamped page on the podium. What I found in a sealed room behind the store is a collection of bonded whiskey from the 1920s, authenticated with full documentation. It's going to public auction in Denver next month under a contract I've already signed. Here's that, too. The room had gone very quiet, the good kind of quiet where people lean in. And third, I said, the part that's actually about this family. I unfolded the last pages. When I was tracing the whiskey's provenance, I found the original records from 1931. A promissory note and a bill of sale, Ian Howard's signature on the seller's line, and stapled behind them a county foreclosure notice from 1933. I looked at my father then, not cruelly. Just plainly, the way you look at someone you've finally stopped being afraid of. My grandfather didn't buy the Howard place, Dad. He loaned a drowning man money in the Depression at terms that would shock anyone in this room. Full balance due in 90 days. When Howard couldn't pay, Amos took the land, the building, and everything in it for the price of the debt. That's where the Rutledge name started. Right there in the room you stood in 3 weeks ago and called other people's trash. My father's face came apart in front of the whole town. "That's a lie," he said, too loud, lunging half a step toward me. "Put that down, Brooke." Wade was on his feet, red to his collar. I stood there and let them be the loud ones for once. "It's not a lie," I said quietly. "The foreclosure and the transfer are recorded at this county's own courthouse, 1933. Any of you can pull them Monday morning. The originals are in a safe deposit box you can't get to, and the gentleman in the gray suit 3 tables back is from the auction house." The man stood. "I can confirm the consignment is signed, and the provenance is documented. The sale will proceed as scheduled under Ms. Rutledge's name." The publisher of the Sentinel was writing fast. Wade pushed through to the front. "We'll have lawyers on this by Monday. There are claims, there's family interest." There's nothing," I said. "I bought it, I own it. Everything I have I can show on paper. Every dollar, every signature, every date. Can you?" My brother opened his mouth and closed it. Because we both knew exactly what his paper looked like. Going back to a strip parcel in 2019 with my initials on a lie. My mother sat back down slowly, looking at my father like she was seeing the foundation of her own life for the first time. I didn't gloat. The wanting to was right there, hot in my throat, 33 years of it. But I'd learned what my family never did. The loud win isn't the real one. I set the microphone back in its stand. Gathered my copies into a neat stack, slid them into the envelope, unhurried, the way I'd close a ledger. "Congratulations on the award, Dad," I said. "You did build a lot. That part's true." Then I walked down the 3 steps, past the family table, past my mother's stunned face and my brother's red one. Past 200 people who had come to crown the Rutledge name and were now learning what it was poured on. Nobody clapped, nobody booed, they just watched me go. Outside, the desert night was cold and clean. I stood in the parking lot and breathed, and there it was again on my own coat, diesel and damp lime, the smell of the cellar, the smell of the foundation. Only now it didn't smell like my father's contempt or my family's secret. It smelled like ground I'd dug up honestly and planted my own name in. The auction in Denver brought $1.3 million. The Sentinel ran the real story that Sunday, the discovery, the documentation, and the 1931 bill of sale. Dale Mercer's name stopped showing up on listings. Wade's lawyers never called because there was nothing for them to hold. The station opened the following spring, restored with Sutter's partnership. The old pumps kept for show. The bonded cellar preserved behind glass with a plaque of its own that told the true history. Howren's name first. People drive the old highway again now just to see it. My mother came once, after it opened. She walked through the bright, restored rooms and stood a long time at the glass over the cellar, reading Howren's name. Then she found me and said the family missed me. That I'd made my point. That surely now I could let it rest and stand with them again. The old pull was there. It always will be. The door is not locked, Mom, I said. It never was. You can come here any time. But I'm done asking your permission to be worth something. She told me, softer than she'd ever said anything, that family closes ranks. That I'd chosen the door. I just smiled. You're right, I said. I did choose the door. I just walked through a different one than you meant. She stayed for a coffee. When she left, she touched my arm at the threshold, just for a second, and didn't try to grab anything by it. It was the most honest thing she'd done in years. If you take one thing from my story, take this. Your worth was never theirs to hand you or to take back. And sometimes, the very thing they call your grave is just the ground nobody else was brave enough to dig.